Go ahead and get started. I have a few folks hopping on a little later. So, was thinking, you know, given that the weather has changed and kind of starting to feel like winter, although it's going to be like, a little warm this week, which is like all over the place. But it got me thinking about, we've been focusing some time on compassion and safety before that, and I think if we keep touching on compassion in pieces, we don't have to stay there for very long. That eventually that starts to I think become easier to digest. So I thought it'd be time to start shifting to a slightly different topic, and one um, that might be a topic that some of us experience a little maybe heavier in the winter, which is, to start to shift to uh, kind of the areas that tend to impact our mood, especially in the winter. And some of us may experience like seasonal affective disorder, so it actually becomes a full blown like kind of kind of yearly depression. And others might just find yourselves feeling more like hibernating, like don't want to do much, and I kind of want to stay in, and um, you know, uh, and maybe even kind of just lower energy. Um, and Yeah, so um, so with that, in the past we've talked about this, but I'm gonna bring this up because I think it's a kind of way to think about our mood, and when we're using mindfulness to kind of help us navigate this and kind of surf the swells of the season, the changes, as well as our own mood. Um, so when we're thinking about the areas in which kind of what tends to lead to depression, um, oftentimes we tend to think that it's feeling sad or feeling angry or feeling kind of the negative emotions, the emotions that we may not want to feel. Um, and that, if we just don't feel those, we won't be depressed. Yeah. The problem with that is what we end up doing is we actually don't feel, and that's what causes depression. Yeah. So in other words, if you're feeling overwhelmed from the amount of anger you're having and you stop feeling, I don't want to feel, I'm trying to avoid it, well, then we literally depress our mood, and we actually become depressed. So those who have had depression, the common misconception is, well, if I just stay positive and if I just don't go to those negative feelings, it'll be fine. But we have negative feelings just as we have positive feelings. Even calling them negative and positive gives them a connotation that I don't love, but it's easier to talk about that way. Meaning, the reason I don't love it is because um, uh, really, if we can approach all emotion as emotion for what it is, our body telling us something, something to be listened to be curious about, um, well, then we don't try to get rid of certain ones and hang on to others. So, in much the same way we've talked about the three poisons, if you remember, was like um, uh, aversion to things. So like we want to push things away that we don't like. So think about like, I don't want to feel sad. I don't want to feel whatever it is. Yeah. And we also try to have more of. kind of grasping is what we call it, of the things that we want. Yeah. So I want to feel happy. I don't want to feel sad. Yeah, the problem with that is we end up feeling the thing we don't want to feel and not the thing we do. Like, that's just human nature. And then the third poison is illusion. Yeah. The stories around um, ourselves, the world, other people. So if we put this in the context of, kind of things we've discussed in the past, and kind of where we're going with this, it's not feeling, the idea that not feeling these, what we call negative emotions, anger, disgust, fear, you know, um, uh, sadness. Um, we tend to think by not feeling it, we'll be okay. But it's actually the opposite. We need to feel it. So one of the things that I've brought up is this idea of, like, when we can kind of check in with ourselves during this time. It's like, what am I trying not to feel? What am I trying to avoid and get rid of? Yeah. Especially when we're starting to not feel like our mood's doing so well, or even if you just want to do kind of almost like a car gets an oil change, or you check the fluid on something. It's like, let me check myself. Am I trying to resist or get rid of certain emotions right now? And so am I trying to am I averse to it? Am I trying to get rid of it, or am I trying to cling on to certain ones? Yeah. Like, sometimes clinging on to, I just need it to be peaceful. I just need that, and I do that all the, like, I just need, like, especially at 10 o'clock at night, my son's still up and he's jumping off the walls. I'm like, I just need, that's actually causing suffering. Yeah. Because I'm wanting the thing that's not there. Yeah. I'm resisting the frustration. Yeah. So that's one thing. So what am I resisting, clinging on to emotionally? Yeah. The second piece is, what am I buying into? So the illusion, like, what stories am I buying into right now? These might be stories about ourselves. They might be something like, yeah, I'm just a hopeless person, or I'm just, it could be a statement about you. It could be a whole story you have about you, Although I'd like to do this, I can't do this. We do all these mental gymnastics to, in a way, sometimes stay stuck. The third piece is, what am I not doing right now that really matters to me? In other words, values. So what am I not doing that really matters to me? So if you think about those three areas, so values being, let me slow down for a second. So let me talk about values for a second, and then we'll talk about the three areas. So with values, there's a few things. One, when we don't know what our values are, we feel lost. Yeah, I don't know what's the purpose, what's the meaning, that kind of thing. We don't feel like we have a direction. So it'd be like getting in the car and just driving to drive. And that might feel okay sometimes. But what if you're like, but I want to get somewhere. I have no idea where I'm going, but I want to get somewhere. Well, you gotta have a direction. Values also, though, because of that meaning and purpose, actually help things to be softer. So certain frustrations, if we're living more aligned with our values, certain frustrations that we have, or emotions, are easier to bear. Certain people are easier to bear. Certain pain, emotional, physical pain, is easier to bear because of it. It's like a balm. Yeah? Think about when you're really doing something that matters, and that you really feel passionate about, and what happens to some of the things that you're, that are painful. So, I can give you an example. If I'm, I told all of you I started doing that electric foiling in the lake, so it's called e-foiling. And before I was doing that, there's things that were frustrating me. My kids are screaming, whatever. I can't show up in the way I want to show up because I'm frustrated, and it's a lot, and it feels like too much sometimes. Um, as soon as I started doing that, it just made that same thing that felt so unbearable more bearable. Yeah, it made it like just a little more tolerable because I'm doing stuff that fulfills me. Yeah, and so that helps us weather those other storms. So values are extremely important. Yeah, and remember, these aren't values other people give you, but values, your values. Um, so we put it all together. It's not that all three of those things need to be off when we're talking about mood or how to maybe work with seasonal affective disorder or just low mood in general when that happens. It can be one of those areas that just is out of balance, and that can create, um, you know, that can lead to depression or low mood or, really difficult time in the winter. What particularly I notice is a lot of times people stop doing the things they value, stop doing the fun things that you do. Think about like how active, if you are an active person, that you are in the summer versus the winter. Yeah. If you don't have that same balm of that thing that really matters to you, the winter is going to be harder. So I can't go to the lake in the winter. I mean, I could, but like freezing water does not sound very fun, and it sounds actually pretty tough. Now, I know Shane, you used to do some well, cold plunging, right? So I haven't done that. Maybe that'll be a next step. Is how do I cold plunge with a board and whatnot? But um, uh, but the idea is, what is it that I can do that's active, that's physical, that represents those values, even when I don't have that thing. Yeah? A lot of times we get stuck in where we are rather than what it is we need. So in other words, we get stuck with, well, I'm in Utah, I can't do that. Yeah, but what is it about that? So if you're like, I want to be on the beach in the sun, but I'm in Utah. Okay? So let's look at, what is it about the beach and the sun? Is it the heat? Because I think we could probably find like, I just found out there's some cool, like, you can do this, like, places where they have like a cold plunge that you can get into, then you can go into a sauna, and then they have like a wading pool, and you like can go for like 2 hours. um, John, our other psychologist here, was telling me about it, and I was like, that's pretty cool. I don't have 2 hours usually, but I want to try that. But point being, if the warmth and the revitalization of water is something you need, that could be an idea, right? Like, it's opening up to other ways of getting these values met when we don't have maybe all the things aligned. If it's the actual direct sun, you're not getting that, then maybe it's like, do I want to go to a tanning bed, or do there's some of these cool rock caves with Himalayan sea salt lamps, and there's all sorts of stuff that you can find if you're willing to shift from the things that maybe you wish you had and weren't here, but what is it that those things represent that I could do here? And there might just be some natural barriers to that. There might be, what, it's not good to go in a tanning bed, but I really like the sun against my skin. So maybe right now that's not a possibility. What else? What other values can I connect with, or things that I need? So, um, so a lot of times also, and these are all interconnected. So, a lot of times we're buying into something, a story about how we can't do something, about how we're limited by something. It might be a personal limitation, an external limitation, and there are legitimate limitations. There are. So I'm not saying that there aren't. Like, a human need, for example, is to be accepted. That's a human need. Yeah. What if you're not being accepted right now by others? That's not okay, right? and that is a real thing that we can't maybe meet that need, at least externally. How can we meet it with community? How can we meet it with the people that do care about us, or even ourselves? Yeah. So there are legitimate limitations. I'm not saying there aren't. And there are needs we have, and needs are different than values. Yeah. So when a need's not being met, that's another thing. We didn't talk about that, but that's kind of a base thing. Like when a need is not being met, none of those other things we've talked about actually can, we can't work on those. Meaning we can, but I'll use that example, acceptance. Like if we're feeling attacked or not accepted, it's hard to then focus on our values. It's hard to focus on, um, you know, stories I'm bought into. It's hard to focus on, um, uh, you know, what emotions am I trying to avoid, and so forth. We need to figure out how do we meet those needs first. So I'd say that's at the base. Yeah, needs. Needs are like safety. Like we need to be safe. Like have safety, right? Like needs are um, food, water, shelter. The basic needs. But there's also emotional needs, love, acceptance. Yeah. So I bring that up to say that needs are different than values, and so I want to just point that out. When needs aren't being met, it's can we meet those needs? Can we find others who can help us meet those needs? And sometimes, honestly, we can't find others who meet our needs until we've kind of done some of that work ourselves to meet ourselves. Meaning, if I don't accept me, I'm not going to accept somebody else trying to accept me. I'm not going to. Right? I've got to first. And that's the hard part. Yeah. It's not taking away that I'm not, like, let's say I'm being bullied. Yeah. If I don't respect myself, if I'm bullying myself, it's hard to, to not, to find others or be willing to find others or even say to myself, that's not okay. And I need to find a community or find others that I'm not going to be bullied by. Right? We kind of continue in that pattern. So needs come first, then everything else. Yeah. So that's actually where we're going to start today. I kind of went backwards a little bit, but to get to why we're going to focus on needs and kind of exploring what needs maybe aren't being met. Yeah. And then we'll start to make our way around those other areas. And kind of that idea of the three poisons, I think, is a good way to look at that. So we'll start off with the meditation with this. So feel free to start shifting into whatever posture, whatever kind of way you would like to sit for this practice. And I said sit, but that can also be laying down. Go ahead and start by taking a few deep breaths in, down, just as a way to connect with the present moment intentionally. And as always, you can close the eyes or choose to keep them open, whichever you prefer. And starting by bringing the focus has left the breath and bringing it back to the breath, and letting the breath be the anchor for a little bit. Perhaps letting go, if it's possible, of what we just talked about, kind of in a more heady, intellectual way. And coming back over and over to breathing, to your anchor. And as you focus on breathing, maybe acknowledging for a moment that this need to breathe, to have oxygen, that this is being met in this moment. And perhaps just acknowledging that. You can spend a lot of time focusing on what we don't have. Maybe we can also acknowledge what we do have, provide a balance here. And this is a universal need, and that's where we'll start, is some universal needs that everyone has. The need for the organs to function as they are, the brain and nervous system. These are physiological needs. Most likely these are being met, so maybe acknowledging this in this moment. And the body also has needs for hunger and thirst. And checking in with yourself, are these currently met? Or are you experiencing hunger or thirst? If you are acknowledging this, there's no need to necessarily react to this or to meet this need in this moment, but making a note to yourself to meet this need after we're done with the meditation. Connecting with maybe the need for shelter. If this is being met, if you have a place that houses you, maybe making note of this. If at any point these needs are not being met, then again, making note of this as well. Something to focus on, to come back to. It's very important that We figure out how to get these basic needs met. Checking in with safety. And right now, we're going to focus in on these needs as being in this moment, right here, right now. In this moment. Is there physical safety? If there isn't, then that means there's some sort of attack that might be occurring, and make sure you listen to this and respond right away. If it's a felt sense of lack of safety, maybe an emotional safety, it's something we can explore more of. So rather than react as if we're being attacked in this moment, something to be curious about, to explore. And so we'll shift to psychological safety. This might be safety we feel within ourselves, or how we feel around others, and feeling a sense of safety there. So for example, if you get bullied or being attacked, maybe outside of this moment, then those would be sources of a lack of safety. That need is not being met. And as we go through this, there's not necessarily a hierarchy. And at the same time, there may be, starting with what's internal and working our way to what's external. And so feel free to stop at any of these points that you make note of where a need is not being met, and see if you can meditate on this. See if you can bring mindfulness, compassion to these needs, and ask yourself, what do I need in order to have this met? What needs to occur? Whether it's something I need to do or others to meet this need. Again, sometimes the need is only met from within. Sometimes the need is there's a real change that needs to take place culturally or in a community. Now also connecting with more emotional needs. Maybe the need to feel loved, to feel accepted, to feel understood, respected. These are just some examples. If other needs come to mind, then making note of these. Reminding yourself that these are universal needs, human needs we all have. A lot of times We can say, well, I'd like to be accepted. If we can kind of say it within a universal truth of everyone wants to be accepted. Sometimes it's easier to hold that way. It doesn't feel so personal. Or sometimes it just helps to make it feel a little less self-focused, more connected with others. There might be other needs we haven't touched on, like the need to feel understood. Need for connection. Touch. Some needs that we have may also inform values. For example, we all likely have the need to be loved. And some of us may hold the values of how we want to love others. So sometimes these needs inform values. One way to differentiate, if this helps, is a need without it being met may feel suffocating, may feel the same as not being able to eat, to starve. And although values can have that quality, generally speaking, when we're not in line with the values, it may feel miserable, depressing, a lack of vitality, but not the same quality of starvation. And so for today's practice, seeing if you can focus in on needs. If all your needs feel like they're being met, then just spending the next few minutes, savoring this, acknowledging it, maybe being thankful for this. If in today's practice you've identified a need that's not being met, see if you can bring that need to mind if you haven't already. And maybe acknowledging that it's not being met, and maybe how hard it is to have this not be met. And now, meditating on the question, is there anything I can do that's reasonably in my power to do to meet this need? Is there a way I can meet this need? If there is a way, staying here, just asking yourself what you need in order to do this. If the need is more interpersonal, and it feels like not within your ability to give to yourself, and maybe asking yourself, what do I need to do or to communicate to others so that they can help meet this need? And if the need is not possible to be met right now, by yourself, by others, and see if you can acknowledge how tough this is right now. Perhaps giving yourself some words of encouragement or kindness. It's painful enough to not have the need met. But when we try to convince ourselves otherwise, we can feel like we're gaslighting ourselves. We can feel misunderstood by ourselves. Now, wherever you're at with this, taking a few moments to let go of the focus. Beginning to end this practice. Maybe moving the body a little bit. And when you're ready to end it, honoring the practice in any way you'd like, and opening the eyes if they're closed.